Hey, what's up? Welcome back to your channel name. This time, we're going to dive into a story that will make you think twice before walking alone at night. Grab some snacks, turn off the lights, and listen closely. Emily Rosenthal arrived in England in the middle of autumn, just as the air turned sharp and dry leaves scattered across the cobbled streets of Downville, a small town known more for its history than any modern appeal. She came as an exchange student from Canada, accepted into Downville University for a year of study. Her dream was modest, to write a thesis on Gothic literature of the Victorian era. Ironically, she had no idea that her life would soon unravel into a Gothic story she could never put to paper. Upon arrival, she knew no one. With a large suitcase and a dying phone battery, she wandered from place to place, searching for long-term student accommodation. Most apartments were too expensive for her modest budget. She scoured university forums and international student groups until she stumbled upon a brief listing that caught her eye: Hollow House, £80 per week. Near the woods. Quiet and peaceful. With her bank account dwindling, she wasted no time. She contacted the number listed and was soon directed to the address by a middle-aged man. Emily had no idea that by choosing Hollow House, she was also choosing to awaken something that should have remained buried forever. The property agent who met her outside Hollow House looked rushed and distracted. He kept glancing at his watch and avoided eye contact when Emily asked about the history of the building. He handed her an old-fashioned key and a faded rental agreement printed in a typewriter font. Once she signed, he mumbled a quick warning about not smoking inside and left abruptly, without even walking her through the house. From the outside, Hollow House resembled a relic from wartime. Its wooden door groaned when pushed open, and a strange coldness greeted her from within, like the stale breath of something invisible. Emily dragged her suitcase inside and looked up at the high ceilings, cracked crown moldings, and a spiral staircase leading upward. The house was, as promised, quiet, but not in a natural way. It felt like the silence was being enforced by something unseen, something holding its breath within the walls. Unbeknownst to Emily, that agent was the last keeper of an unwritten tradition. Every few years, a new tenant arrived, unknowingly opening Hollow House once again. And now, it was her turn. Emily's footsteps echoed through the narrow hallway of Hollow House, the wooden floor groaning beneath her every step as if the house itself protested her presence. The air was thick with the scent of aged timber and dust, an unmistakable aroma of a place too long forgotten. There was no sound except the occasional gust of wind sneaking through the cracked windows and the steady ticking of an ancient grandfather clock at the end of the corridor, counting down seconds that felt eerily forced to keep moving. She opened the door to her assigned room on the second floor. It was small but adequate, a wrought iron bed, an old desk that looked like it belonged in a boarding school from the 1800s, and a tall wardrobe facing a window streaked with grime. The overcast sky outside cast a dull gray over the room. When she opened the window, a burst of cold wind rushed in, carrying strange whispers from the distant woods, sounds she couldn't place but instinctively knew she didn't want to hear again. She shut it quickly, unsettled for reasons she couldn't explain. There was no welcome, no energy of past human presence. It felt like the house itself was trying to judge her, testing if she belonged, or if she would be rejected. Emily tried to shake the feeling off by unpacking her things, but every now and then, she felt a prickle down her neck, as though something watched her from the shadows near the staircase. From that moment on, she knew that Hollow House wasn't just old, it was waiting. Later that evening, two other tenants emerged from their rooms. Nathan, an architecture student from France, introduced himself politely, though a hint of unease flickered in his expression. He occupied the room nearest the staircase leading to the third floor. Yuki, an art student from Japan, lived in the room next to Emily. She was quieter, more withdrawn, and seemed unusually sensitive to the house's atmosphere. Both had been living there for one semester, and Emily quickly realized they knew something she didn't. At first, she was relieved to know she wasn't alone. But as the night unfolded, she noticed that neither of them talked much about the house itself. When Emily brought up strange sounds or the odd feeling of being watched, Nathan would subtly change the subject, and Yuki would quietly excuse herself to her room. It wasn't rudeness, there was something unspoken between them, something they didn't want to confront again. One thing became clear, both of them reacted the same way every time someone mentioned the third floor. Their eyes darkened, their posture shifted, and their voices dropped. It wasn't just superstition, it was fear, guilt, and resignation all wrapped into one. Emily wanted to believe they were just spooked by the setting. But that night, as she lay in bed, she heard heavy footsteps above her. Footsteps that, according to the house plan, should not have existed. The next morning, when Emily casually mentioned the footsteps, Nathan went quiet for a moment. Then he responded in a low, deliberate voice. He didn't ask her to believe anything. He simply advised her not to ever, under any circumstances, go up to the third floor. The reason wasn't safety in the usual sense. It was something else, something unseen. He claimed certain things could be reopened if disturbed too often. Emily laughed it off, assuming it was an attempt to scare the new girl. A typical student prank fueled by too many ghost stories. But Nathan's expression remained unchanged, even as she joked. In that moment, Emily sensed something deeper. His fear was genuine, and his warning wasn't meant to spook her. It was meant to protect her. The staircase to the third floor was noticeably neglected. Dust thickly blanketed each step, and cobwebs hung from the handrail like veils. But the most unsettling thing wasn't the condition, it was the feeling. When she stood at the base of the stairs, her chest tightened, like something enormous was watching her. Not from the top, but from inside the walls. From that day on, she started noticing that the door at the top sometimes creaked open on its own. There was no wind, no movement, but the door shifted. As though whatever waited above had started listening. It began with the faintest sounds, barely audible at first. Emily had woken in the middle of the night, unsure of what had stirred her. The wind outside had died down, and the stillness in the house was suffocating. But then she heard it, like the shuffle of bare feet on old wooden floorboards, followed by a breathy whisper. It wasn't loud or aggressive, just present, like someone was mumbling too close to her door. She pulled her blanket up, heart thudding, and waited, not daring to move. When silence returned, she forced herself up and peeked out into the hallway. Dim light from the antique wall sconces flickered faintly. Everything seemed in place. But then she noticed it, just at the edge of the staircase leading to the third floor, the dust looked disturbed. It had been stepped on. A fresh trail of thin footprints appeared, leading upward. Emily knew neither Nathan nor Yuki went up there. She had heard no doors open, no creaking from the floorboards in their rooms. The whispers returned the next night. Clearer this time. Male and female voices tangled together in a language she couldn't understand, low, garbled, like a broken record trying to speak. She covered her ears, but the voices seemed to echo from inside her head. Days passed with little sleep, and the weight of the house seemed to press harder on her every hour. Emily tried to focus on classes, research, and her thesis, but her mind remained tethered to Hollow House. On a particularly foggy night, she returned late from the library. The streets were empty, and a creeping dread followed her all the way back. As she entered the house, she felt a sudden chill, colder than the wind outside. She climbed the stairs slowly, the air turning heavier with each step. Then she saw it. The door at the top of the third-floor staircase, the one that always stayed closed, was slightly ajar. Just a crack. Barely enough to see anything. But in that sliver of blackness, she could make out a shadow, not moving, but existing, too dense to be caused by light alone. She stared for minutes, paralyzed, waiting for something to move, or reach, or whisper. Nothing happened. And yet she felt her thoughts clouding, as if the open door wasn't just revealing something physical, but unsealing something inside her. She didn't sleep that night. Not because she was scared, but because she couldn't. It was like her body forgot how to rest. It wasn't until breakfast the next day that Yuki broke her silence. Her hands trembled slightly as she sipped her tea, eyes distant. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her words were like keys unlocking pieces Emily hadn't known were hidden. Yuki said she had gone up once, only once. It was early in the semester, before she had truly understood the warnings. Her curiosity had led her up the creaking steps to the third floor. There, behind the door, was a small hallway lined with mirrors, old and warped. She had looked into one. She didn't see herself. Not entirely. In the reflection, her face was smudged, distorted. But something else was clear. Over her shoulder, a woman stood. Pale, with hair cascading over her face, her body twisted unnaturally. When Yuki turned around, there had been nothing there. But when she looked again into the mirror, the woman was closer. Closer than before. Yuki never returned to the third floor. But sometimes, when she passed the staircase, she saw flashes in her peripheral vision. The woman. Watching. Waiting. Not trapped behind glass, but perhaps just beneath it. By the second week, Emily noticed something had changed, not just in the house, but in her. The coldness that lingered in Hollow House had begun to follow her. Even under the rare moments of sunshine, a chill coiled around her spine like frost wrapping itself through her bones. Her classmates mentioned she looked pale, distracted. One even asked if she was ill. When Emily looked at her own reflection in the bathroom mirror at school, her face seemed drained. Not thinner, exactly. Just less there. Her eyes looked dim, as if the light inside them had dimmed ever so slightly. Worse yet, the feeling of being followed never left. She would sit in lectures and suddenly feel as though someone stood behind her, close enough to touch. But when she turned around, the seat behind was empty. When walking down the library aisle, books would fall off shelves. No one around. No draft. It wasn't just Hollow House anymore. Whatever she'd awakened had begun bleeding into her life beyond its walls. The nightmares came in waves. At first, they were blurry, a flickering candle, footsteps echoing in a long hallway, whispers too distorted to understand. But soon, they grew sharper, more vivid. Always the same dream. She stood in front of a mirror, alone in the third-floor hallway. The mirror was too tall, too wide. Her reflection would blink slower than she did, move just a fraction later. And behind her, always, stood a woman. Tall. Drenched in shadow. Face smooth and featureless, like a wax figure melting under pressure. No eyes, no mouth, just skin stretched over where features should have been. But Emily could feel the eyes watching. Piercing her through that blank canvas. In the dream, she would try to move but couldn't. The woman would raise a hand, pressing it to the mirror. Then another hand. Then another. And then, Emily would wake gasping, fingers numb, soaked in sweat. But sometimes, when she opened her eyes, she could swear she saw the imprint of handprints on her bedroom mirror, slowly fading as if someone had only just left. Over the next few days, Emily began to notice subtle changes in Nathan. He no longer joined them in the common room after classes, his door always closed and locked. When she did catch glimpses of him in the hallway, his eyes looked sunken, his face pale and slick with sweat. He mumbled to himself, words too low to understand. Once, she saw him standing completely still in the kitchen, staring at the faucet for what must have been 10 minutes straight. The water wasn't running, the lights flickered overhead, and Nathan didn't seem to notice her enter. When she quietly asked if he was okay, he slowly turned his head and simply nodded before walking away without another word. Yuki noticed it too. They both agreed something was off, but neither could explain it. Nathan had always been quiet, but not empty, not like this. Emily began to suspect that whatever presence haunted the third floor wasn't just watching anymore. It was feeding. And Nathan had been the first to open the door too wide. It was Yuki who noticed the change first. The claw-like marks on the second-floor hallway wall, the ones they had both assumed were just old water damage or cracks in the wood, had shifted. The lines no longer looked random. They had curved and connected, forming something eerily close to letters. Not English, but something far older, something wrong. By the third day, the marks had deepened, as if etched with nails into the paint. They glistened faintly under moonlight, and Emily swore she saw them pulse once, like veins filled with something black. She took a picture with her phone, but the screen came up black. No matter how many times she tried, the camera refused to capture what they saw with their eyes. And then they realized something else. Each night, new lines appeared, always branching out from the last. It wasn't a pattern, it was a message. One neither of them could read. One they felt was not meant to be read, but obeyed. While trying to distract herself one afternoon, Emily took to cleaning the corners of her room. The space near the old writing desk had always felt colder, the boards beneath her carpet slightly warped. As she pried one of them open, a musty smell rose from beneath, like rotting paper and damp earth. There, wrapped in yellowed cloth, was a journal. Its leather cover was brittle, and the pages within were stained with age. The handwriting was shaky and frantic, written in ink that had bled into the fibers. It belonged to a student who had lived in Hollow House nearly a century ago. A foreign exchange student from Norway, according to the scribbled notes inside. As she flipped through the pages, Emily's skin grew colder. The entries began normal, adjusting to campus, studying hard, but soon they shifted into panic. The student wrote of hearing voices, of dreaming of faceless women, of a door that shouldn't open but did. Then, a final entry. A single line, scrawled over and over again, "Don't look into the mirror. She only needs your reflection to enter." Emily dropped the journal, heart racing. The handwriting in that final entry matched the style of the marks on the wall. That night, Emily awoke to the sound of muffled sobbing. She rushed to Yuki's room, but the door stood open, the bed empty. The sheets were rumpled, her phone still charging beside the lamp, and her shoes neatly placed by the desk. It was as if she had simply vanished. Emily called her name, searched every floor, even checked the basement. Nothing. Her panic grew unbearable. The old house creaked around her like it was mocking her fear. Nathan's door remained closed. He hadn't emerged at all. On the second floor, just beneath the staircase to the third, Emily saw a single damp footprint. Bare, and smaller than Nathan's. It led up the stairs and stopped at the now closed third-floor door. She didn't dare open it. Not yet. Morning came, but not the sun. The sky outside was gray, and the fog pressed thickly against her window. Yuki was still missing. Campus security claimed she must have left, maybe overwhelmed by stress. But Emily knew better. Yuki wouldn't have left without saying goodbye. Not without her phone. Not like that. Exhausted, Emily tried to rest, but something gnawed at her. She pulled her blanket over her and immediately sat up again. Her pillow smelled strange, earthy and cold, like mold from a deep basement. And there, lying across the white fabric, was a single strand of hair. It was long. Black. Not Yuki's. Not hers. She checked her mirror. Her reflection stood still. Too still. A moment longer than she did. And for just a second, she thought she saw another face behind her. Just a blur. But it was smiling. There was an antique mirror hanging at the end of the second-floor hallway, a relic no one paid much attention to. Its frame was ornate, covered in dark carvings that resembled crawling vines or twisting fingers, hard to tell which. It had always been dusty, its reflection dim. But now, it began to change. One morning, as Emily walked past it, she paused. There was fog, inside the glass. Not just condensation on the surface, but a swirling mist trapped within the mirror's depth, like clouds pressed into silver. She wiped it with her sleeve. The fog didn't move. Her reflection stared back at her, slightly delayed, as if lagging behind her actions. That night, she passed the mirror again and stopped cold. There were fingerprints on the inside of the glass. Small ones, like a child's. Pressed against the mirror as if something inside had tried to claw its way out. Sleep became treacherous. Every time she closed her eyes, Emily found herself in the same place, a long, endless corridor made entirely of mirrors. Her own reflection flanked her on every side, but none of them moved in sync. Some stood still while she walked. Others followed a few steps behind. And one never blinked. In these dreams, she walked barefoot on a wet floor. She could hear water dripping. The air buzzed with whispers in a language she didn't understand. At the end of the hallway, there was always a figure standing with its back to her, a woman, hair dripping, wearing a white nightgown stained with something dark. Emily never got close enough to see her face. She always woke up just before. But every morning, something in her room had moved. Once, it was her desk chair, turned toward the window. Another time, the closet door was ajar, though she remembered closing it. And once, her phone had been placed neatly on her chest, unlocked, with the camera app still running. It was nearly midnight when Emily found Nathan. He was curled on the common room floor, shaking, arms wrapped around himself like a child. His skin was ice cold, his eyes wide open but unfocused. He didn't respond when she called his name. He just stared straight ahead, repeating a single word over and over. At first, Emily couldn't make it out. But as she moved closer, she heard it clearly, Scotty. The name meant nothing to her. Not at first. But his voice trembled when he said it, like it held a weight too great to bear. His fingernails were dirty, as though he'd been digging. His lips were cracked. On his forearm, there were scratches, 3 long marks that hadn't been there before. They looked too symmetrical to be accidental. Too precise. Campus medics came and took him to the infirmary. Emily tried to follow, but one nurse warned her, he might not come back from wherever he's been. Unable to sleep, Emily turned to her laptop and began to dig. The name, Scotty, didn't come up in any student records or local news archives. But in Norse mythology, Scotty was a winter goddess. A giantess. A figure tied to vengeance and desolate places. Her domain was isolation, frost, and shadowed mountains. One legend described her wandering into human settlements, masked in beauty, drawing people in with kindness before leading them into snow-covered forests, never to return. Another version told of her mirror, a cursed relic said to hold the soul of Scotty herself, bound to reflect the desires of those who looked too long. Emily felt her blood go cold. The journal she'd found. The marks on the walls. Nathan's condition. It all connected. And now, Yuki was gone too. She looked back at the mirror in the hallway. The fog had cleared. But now, her reflection was smiling. She wasn't. That night, the dormitory changed. One by one, the lights in each room began to flicker and die, not all at once, but slowly, methodically. First the common room. Then the hallway outside Emily's room. Then the stairwell. The darkness didn't feel empty, it felt aware. By the time Emily's bedside lamp began to buzz and dim, she had already lit 3 candles. She didn't know why, but the fire made her feel safer. The shadows avoided it, pulling back against the walls. But even the candlelight flickered wildly, as if something unseen was breathing against the flame. Then, just before midnight, the emergency backup lights kicked in. A faint red glow filled the hallways. From her room, Emily heard creaking above her, footsteps in the attic. But Hollow House had no accessible attic. It had been sealed for years. Or so they said. While searching for extra candles in the common room, Emily accidentally bumped into the far bookshelf, an old wooden thing that had always leaned slightly to the left. To her shock, it groaned and shifted inward, revealing a narrow gap behind it. She pulled it aside carefully, uncovering a hidden door, small and wooden, with rusted hinges and no handle. Curiosity overpowered her fear. Using a butter knife from the kitchenette, she pried it open and found a tight, spiral staircase leading down. Not up. Down. That made no sense. Hollow House didn't have a basement, or so everyone thought. The air was colder there, thick with the scent of mildew and decay. She didn't descend, not yet. But she stared into that black void for what felt like hours. There was something breathing down there. Something slow and patient. She closed the door and pushed the bookshelf back into place, but she knew now, Hollow House was larger than anyone realized. And parts of it were never meant to be found. 2 days had passed since Yuki disappeared. Her phone had been left behind. Everyone believed she ran away. But that night, at exactly 3:13 a.m., Emily's phone vibrated. A message. From Yuki. There were no words. Just a photo. At first, it was too dark to see. She turned her screen brightness up and gasped. The image was taken from beneath a floorboard, with narrow slats of light shining above. Through the gaps, Emily could see shoes, her own, as if someone had taken the picture while lying directly beneath her bed. Her blood froze. She checked under the bed. Nothing. But she knew, the message had come from somewhere inside Hollow House. From a place deeper than the walls, lower than the floors. And Yuki's phone shouldn't have worked. The SIM card had been removed. The old mirror at the end of the hallway had always unnerved her, but now it betrayed her completely. That night, Emily walked past it with her candle, then stopped in her tracks. Her reflection was wrong. It mimicked her shape, her clothes, her face, but the eyes were different. Darker. Sharper. Like something was watching from behind her own pupils. And it didn't move in sync anymore. When Emily took a step back, the reflection stood still. When she turned her head, it tilted in the opposite direction. Then, as she watched in horror, the reflection smiled. Not a twitch of the lips, not a human smile. It was slow, crooked, and full of teeth. She dropped the candle, and it went out, plunging the hallway into darkness. When she lit it again, the mirror was empty. No reflection. Just fog. The university had finally sent someone, a maintenance worker named Adam, to check on the electrical issues at Hollow House. He was an older man, quiet but friendly, and he didn't seem to believe in ghost stories. Emily watched him test switches, check circuits, and disappear into the hallway with his flashlight. He never came back. Later that evening, his toolbox was found at the bottom of the hidden staircase Emily had discovered, the bookshelf left slightly ajar. No one admitted to opening it. No one even knew about it, except Emily. When campus security searched the area, they claimed they couldn't find the stairs at all. The bookshelf was flush against the wall, unmoved. But Emily knew what she had seen. What she had touched. And now, someone else was gone. The house wasn't just haunted. It was feeding. That night, the house came alive again. Wind howled outside though the trees were still. Doors creaked open without touch. And the whispers returned, softer now, clearer. This time, they weren't just background noise. They said her name. Not shouted. Not called. Whispered, sweetly and slow, like a lullaby sung by something ancient. Emily, they breathed, from inside the walls. Emily, from behind the mirror. Emily, from beneath the floor. She covered her ears, but they kept going. Her room grew colder by the second. Her breath became visible. Then, from the corner of her vision, she saw it again. A figure in white. Dripping. Watching. Closer now than ever before. She wasn't dreaming. She hadn't been for a long time. The laundry room in Hollow House had always felt strangely claustrophobic, even though it was well lit and clean. One evening, while tossing in a few clothes, Emily heard something fall through the old metal laundry chute. It wasn't the usual thump of clothes, this was a solid clank, like a book. She opened the bottom hatch and reached inside. Her fingers brushed against something rough and dry. She pulled it out carefully. It was another journal, this one much older than the first. The leather cover was cracked, and the pages were stained with time, and something darker, like rust or dried blood. The writing inside was erratic, scrawled in several different inks, and in different hands. Dozens of names were listed, all with dates of arrival at Hollow House. Many had check marks. Others had black XS. Some pages were torn. One entry made her stomach turn. Scotty watches from the mirror. Do not say her name aloud. Do not sleep beside water. The house chooses who to keep. The last page was incomplete. It ended mid-sentence. If you're reading this, she's already. That was it. Emily began to notice the stain on the ceiling one morning. A faint, reddish discoloration directly above where she slept. At first, she assumed it was a leak, maybe old pipes rusting. But the weather had been dry. And the stain wasn't brown or yellow, it was deep red, almost black. Over the next 3 days, it grew, branching like veins, spreading outward like something alive beneath the plaster. A foul smell seeped down with it, metallic and sickly sweet, like rotting iron. She reported it to maintenance, but no one came. She left a note for her RA, but it disappeared. The stain didn't drip. It pulled downward, as if it were trying to reach her. One morning, she woke to find a single drop on her blanket. It was thick and warm, like fresh blood. But when she touched it, it vanished. Days began to blur. Emily noticed that sometimes she would look at the clock and suddenly hours had passed. Once, she found herself standing outside the house barefoot at midnight, holding a candle she didn't own, with no memory of how she got there. Things appeared in her room. A hand mirror with a cracked face. A necklace with a small vial of water inside. A child's sock, damp and mud-stained. None of it belonged to her. She began keeping a journal of her own, just to track what was real and what wasn't. But some mornings, pages were filled with handwriting she didn't recognize, long, looping cursive that spiraled inwards, as if the writer had become obsessed with a single point in space. Each of those entries ended with the same phrase. She is almost inside. Rumors had begun to spread around campus about Hollow House. Strange sounds. Lights failing. A girl gone missing. A worker never found. Some students from a nearby dorm came over one night, half mocking, half curious, and decided to hold a séance in the common room. Emily watched from the stairs, not participating, just listening. They formed a circle, lit candles, and read from something they found online. For a while, nothing happened. Then the air changed. The candles began to bend toward the center, as if pulled by some invisible force. The temperature dropped. One student began to weep. Another screamed and clawed at their own face, shouting something in a language no one understood. The lights exploded in a burst of glass and sparks. When it was over, 2 of the students were missing. The rest ran out of the house and never returned. No one spoke of that night again. The university said it was just a misunderstanding. Something had been off for days, but it finally clicked when she tried to return to the laundry room and couldn't find the door. It had simply vanished. Replaced by a blank stretch of hallway she didn't recognize. She thought she was going mad, until she noticed more. The exit stairs used to be just around the corner. Now, they were at the far end of the building. The common room window, once overlooking the quad, now stared into thick trees. Rooms changed numbers. Doors opened to brick walls. A hallway ended in a mirror that wasn't there before. Each night, she pinned a small paper above her door, to see if it moved. Each morning, it was lower. Sometimes upside down. sometimes, gone. The house was shifting. And Emily was still inside. Emily had started keeping her closet tightly shut. Something about the way the shadows fell between her hanging clothes always unsettled her. But one morning, she found the door wide open, and the back wall fractured, hairline cracks splitting across the plaster like veins. The cracks hadn't been there before. She leaned in closer and saw the wall had begun to cave inward, revealing a narrow, dark opening just big enough to crawl through. Dust poured out, thick and gray. Inside was a small crawlspace, lined with splintered wooden beams, no more than 3 feet high. It stretched farther than it should have, deeper than the dimensions of the house allowed. What made her skin crawl were the marks. Thousands of them. Deep gouges scratched into the beams and floor. Some looked like claw marks. Others were the frantic scrapes of fingernails. One message had been carved in jagged, erratic lines across the upper beam. No one leaves. Not once she sees you. Emily closed the door and didn't open the closet again for days. While reviewing a series of photos she had taken around Hollow House for a school project, Emily noticed something strange. In several of the pictures, one she was sure she had taken alone, there was a figure in the background. Always standing. Always still. Dressed in white. But faceless. The figure's face wasn't blurred. It was missing entirely, as if smoothed out like clay, with only the faintest indentation where eyes and mouth should be. In one photo, it stood at the end of the hallway. In another, behind her in the mirror. Each photo showed it closer. She deleted them. But the next day, new ones appeared on her phone. Images she never took, all from odd angles, beneath the bed, from the corner of the ceiling, behind a slightly opened door. Her phone had no camera timer. No remote access. No logical explanation. That night, Emily dreamt of water. Not calm or peaceful, dark, deep water rising from the dormitory floor. In the dream, she wandered the halls as water surged around her ankles, then her knees, then her chest. Lights flickered as the water climbed the walls. Doors refused to open. Windows looked out into pitch black. She was no longer alone. Something swam beneath the surface, brushing against her legs. It had fingers. The water filled her lungs as she screamed, yet there was no pain. Only cold, endless pressure. She saw herself in the mirror, submerged and motionless, eyes wide open, mouth slack. Emily woke up gasping, soaked to the bone. Her bed was drenched. The mattress squelched under her. But the ceiling didn't leak. Her window was shut. Her hair was matted. Her fingertips wrinkled like she had been underwater for hours. The smell of the lake hung thick in the air. After the dream, something compelled Emily to pull back the rug near her bed. The floorboards beneath were warped, uneven. She pried one loose with a kitchen knife, and beneath it was a hollow space filled with dirt and fragments of broken glass. There, half buried in the soil, was a necklace she recognized instantly, Yuki's. A silver chain with a tiny moon-shaped pendant. The same necklace Yuki had been wearing the night she vanished. Emily held it in her hand, and it was warm. Not from the sun or body heat. It throbbed like something alive. That night, she dreamed of Yuki standing at the end of the hallway, pointing at the floor beneath Emily's bed. The necklace had been buried there on purpose. Not hidden. Sealed. Emily returned to the old journal she had found in the laundry chute. She had missed a page, stuck to the back of the leather cover. It was thin and brittle, torn at the edges, with handwriting so faint it could barely be read under candlelight. When the house begins to shift, it means she is choosing. She is always watching. The mirrors are her eyes. The voices are her song. Once she marks you, you no longer walk alone. To stay is to be seen. To be seen is to be taken. Beneath the text was a small sketch, an outline of Hollow House as it once was, before the dorm. It was not just a building. It was a seal. A prison built over something ancient. Emily read the words again and again. The choosing had already begun. And she was no longer just a witness. She was a candidate. As the dorm grew colder and darker, Emily began to hear whispers at night, soft at first, like the rustling of sheets or wine through cracked windows. But soon, they became words. Her name. Spoken with a voice that was not one, but many, overlapping in broken harmony. They echoed from behind the walls, from beneath the floorboards, and through the vents. No matter how loud she played music or how deeply she buried herself beneath the blankets, the whispers pressed in closer. Sometimes they called gently, like a lullaby. Sometimes they screamed, rattling her furniture. Each time she heard them, a mirror would crack. Each time she covered a mirror, another would appear. She no longer knew what was real, only that the house now spoke to her directly. And it knew her name. Determined to find answers, Emily stole an old blueprint of Hollow House from the campus archives. The layout was familiar, except for one glaring omission. A narrow staircase that descended behind the furnace room wasn't on the map. She had passed it dozens of times, assuming it led to storage. That night, she descended the hidden steps. The air grew thick with mold and rot. The walls oozed with moisture. At the bottom, the basement opened into a space that felt impossibly vast, larger than the dorm should allow. The walls were lined with forgotten furniture, student ID cards, shoes, and photos, dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Each photograph showed a different student, all wide-eyed and pale. Some were decades old. Some were recent. In the center of the room stood a full-length mirror, taller than any person, wrapped in chains, cracked but still intact. Its surface rippled like water when Emily stepped closer. Drawn by an invisible force, Emily stepped toward the mirror. The surface shivered at her presence. Her reflection didn't match her movements. It lagged, twitched, then smiled. She hadn't smiled. Suddenly, her reflection began to pound on the inside of the glass, mouth open in a silent scream, eyes wide with terror. Blood began to smear across the inside, as if she were clawing to get out. Then the mirror pulsed with a blinding flash. Emily stumbled back, heart racing. When the light faded, her reflection returned to normal, perfectly mirroring her every move. But she knew what she saw. For a moment, she had glimpsed the version of herself that never escaped. And she understood. The mirror wasn't a window, it was a door. Emily packed her things, panic taking over. She needed to leave. She needed to run. The whispers were growing louder, and the temperature never rose above freezing. Her fingers ached with cold. Her breath misted in her room, even with the heat on. She stormed down the hallway, past the flickering lights, ignoring the bloody footprints that weren't hers. At the front door, she threw it open. Outside was not the campus. It was the forest. Not the real one. An older version. Trees twisted unnaturally, hanging low with rotting vines. The sky above was starless. Silent. Endless. She stepped back, closed the door, opened it again. The same. The real world was gone, or maybe she was. Hollow House had swallowed her whole. And now, she walked within a space that obeyed no rules of time, space, or sanity. Emily returned to her room, trembling. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't scream. Everything around her shifted as if the house breathed with her terror. She opened her journal, her last anchor to reality, and saw a new entry dated tomorrow. She has chosen you. You are hers now. Sleep deeply, little ember. Tomorrow, the mirror opens. The handwriting was hers, but the ink was red. The final page curled at the edges, soaked with moisture, like it had been dropped into water. As she stared at the page, she saw her own reflection in the dark screen of her laptop, only this time, it didn't look away when she turned around. The camera light turned on by itself. And the screen went black. That was our story for tonight. Do you think it's just an ordinary tale, or is there something more to it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories. See you, if you still dare to watch next time.